Hello, my name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and this is another episode of Roll for Mutation. I have with me Mark Major.
Hi there. I'm Mark, he and them. Looking forward to talking about some older games today.
Yeah. So it's a slightly different format than what we've done before. We're talking about two licensed games. And originally I just kind of thought about them as licensed games, but I realized that they're very close temporally, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of actual overlapping connections that we're going to see between these two. There are more licensed post-apocalyptic games than I would have thought. We've got a lot of conventional ones: Stalker, Fallout, Jeremiah, War Against the Chitauri. We have a smaller set of zombie ones. We have Army of
Mhm.
Darkness and The Walking Dead. But by far and away, the vast majority of them are what I'll call sort of dying Earth, fallen Earth fantasy
Mhm.
games. So literally the dying Earth role-playing game, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, World of Aiden, which is another one connected to one we're going to talk about today, GURPS New Sun, the upcoming fifth season. Like there's some really interesting ones. We're talking about marginal ones today, I think is
Yeah.
how I wanna put that. So I'm going to talk about mine, and then
Mhm.
Mark's going to talk about his. So to preview this, you probably saw it in the show title. We're talking about Tank Girl, and we're going to talk about Ralph Bakshi's Wizards.
Yeah.
So Tank Girl, I'm going to go through a bunch of things in a slightly different order than we usually do. Need to put a context to Tank Girl herself, itself. The original Tank Girl is a comic that comes out in the late 1980s and then moved into a series in the early 1990s. So very strong look and punk aesthetic, influenced by British comics, lots of 2000 AD, and you can see some of the French stuff from Humanoids,
Mhm.
Mobius, Metal Hurlant. It's created by Jamie Hewlett and Alan Martin. And the first of those is one of the co-creators of the band Gorillaz. And if you look at Gorillaz and if you look at the original Tank Girl, you will see the same aesthetic. It has a very weird early 1990s vibe. It's a world that we've got visually and narratively transitioning from real punk, like original punk, and indie comics into something a little more polished. We go from the 70s and 80s into high irony, meta, and of course, this is a time when there's a real transition into grunge and other splits there. So, to quote Wikipedia at length here about the original Tank Girl, quote, the comic's irreverent style is heavily influenced by punk visual art, and its strips are frequently deeply disorganized, anarchic, absurdist, and psychedelic. The strip features various elements with origins in surrealist techniques, fanzines, collage, cut up technique, stream of consciousness, and metafiction, with very little regard or interest for conventional plot or committed narrative. So, obviously, the perfect thing to film. Director Rachel Talalay, I think is how you say it, apparently saw this as a real opportunity and wanted to do it. Went to a couple of different studios, finally got, I think, New Line on, and they brought Hewlett and Martin on originally, and they were helping with the art direction and approach, and then studio interference. And Hewlett and Martin drop out. The film gets made. If you've seen the film, you know what it ended up being.
Mhm.
Not exactly as we might have imagined it. And so let's put a pin in the movie because now we're going to come to the game. West End Games had several successful game series and licenses. And while they had been strong for a time, by the early 1990s, they were on the decline. So this is the time Paranoia, as we mentioned before, had stumbled with the third edition. And then that's followed by disastrous fifth edition. So we're mid 90s right now, 1995. Star Wars continued strong, but again, this is a product that's beholden to the licensee. And let's not undersell this. For years, West End Games had been building up the lore and world of Star Wars. There
Mhm.
hadn't been a lot developed. They had been really pushing that. There were new novels coming out and really creating that excitement that then they would lose the license, the new trilogy would arrive, and a lot of these things would get washed away.
Mhm.
Ghostbusters is another successful game from West End, their license one, but it had never been capitalized on.
Mhm.
So their biggest success is Torg at this time, the sort of the non-Star Wars success. And this is a weird interdimensional war RPG with many different genres and worlds. It's a completely new system. It doesn't use the D6 system, and instead it has a strong use of cards and tokens in play. So it's a little bit like GURPS with cards and tokens, but with a meta plot and worlds that are really distinct and specific. And the idea that you are moving characters between those worlds. And it came out strong in 1990. Like that was big. And I remember when it hit the shelves, people were very excited about it. But within a few years, the company had released everything they could for it. They were trying some second editions of the things, and again, by 95, they've wrapped up support for it. But during the heyday of Torg, they decided to build a new generic system on that core mechanic that Torg presented. And instead of going with D6, they went with this one. This is one of those decisions that boggles my mind. So, first to try it out, they did a game called Shatter Zone, which kind of proved that they could do it. It was, again, maybe a 2 year line came out. They said, let's take that and that setting, those bits, and we'll do it as master book. And master book tweaks the Torg mechanics to make them less pulpy, and I'm going to air quotes here, more realistic. And then I can only describe this as vomiting out a slew of licensed property supplements. Indiana Jones, Necroscope, Aiden, Species, Tales from the Crypt, and Tank Girl. So this comes out in 94. Master Book is in these box sets. It can also be bought separately. And by 97, it was clear that this was a failure, that this had been overproduced, huge print runs, and things were just sitting on the shelves. And like, I seriously cannot remember selling any of these when I worked for years at the
Yeah.
store. They did not move. And so at that point, they go, hey, you know what? We've got this other system, D6. And they make that the house system. And they go for more licenses. They redo Indiana Jones. They get Men in Black in there, Hercules and Xena, and eventually DC Comics. And none of these hit. DC got a little bit more support. But by 98, West End Games declares bankruptcy and says it's okay because we've got the Star Wars license. And Lucasfilm says, no, you don't. And West End goes under. So, Masterbook. I have to preface this that, boy, the 1990s are a shitty time for role playing game mechanics. Like, we'll see this with what I'm talking about and what Mark is going to talk about. Masterbook's mechanics actively make me angry. Actively make me angry as I'm reading through them. You have 8 attributes, 68 points divided among them, meaning 8 or 9 is average. And here's where it begins. And I'm being a little too granular here, but I have to just talk about it. You've got your hit point, which is called toughness, and it's a derived stat from your strength and endurance. And you have to look that up on a table. It's not a formula. It's not, okay, I can see how this divides out. And both are different. So I have to look up on the table for the strength and a table for the endurance and then
Mhm.
add those numbers together. This is a running theme throughout the game. Unnecessary lookups, asymmetrical things, and no table has a formula. There is no table that you can look at and say, okay, I could do this in my head, how this works out. The table is just reference. No, the table is the point. Like why? Why are you already doing this? Why you have 4 different movement rates? They're different, calculated differently. It just so here's the other one. You have God, I can't even describe. So you've got your skills. We've got some skills that you have. When you make a test, you roll against a difficulty number. Okay? 8 is a difficulty number. You figure out your attribute and your skills, and then any modifiers, which they don't describe very well. And
Mhm.
then you roll 2d10. But you don't directly add the 2d10 to the roll. Instead, you have to go to a non formula based chart and you have to look up your total, and that will give you a bonus number, which is then added to the roll and then compared to the difficulty. Hey, and if you roll a 10 on the die, it explodes, but that's pretty minimal gain once you crest 21. Oh, okay. But now we've got, did I succeed or not? Oh no. No, no, you don't know exactly that yet. Because now you have to take that difficulty number, you have to take this finalized number from a table lookup, and you now have to compare that to a success table, which gives you your degrees of success. And that's important because, again, a non-formula based table, the jump ups are arbitrary, and you have to look at this to determine your damage number. It's not optional. So that's the base mechanics. The most unique element of the book, of the master book system, is the card deck. Players have a hand of cards which they can use to modify actions. And when you're not in detailed turns, you can play cards from this freely. But in combat, you can take one card action per turn. You can place a card from your hand into your pool, making it available later, or you can play any cards that you already have down in your pool, or you can trade cards with other players on a one-to-one basis freely. So some of these cards are enhancements, bonuses to attributes, big benefit if you double cross a fellow PC, retrying an action, canceling a just played card. Okay, mechanical stuff, but there's also subplot cards like alertness. Hey, we're going to establish common ground. Hey, a nemesis appears. Hey, there's a romance. Hey, there's martyrdom, in which to get the benefit, your character has to die. This is one of the cards in the deck that we all have access to. And there are jokers as well, all of these weirdly drastic but narratively vague effects. Now, don't get me wrong, and we've said this before when we talked about paranoia. I love cards. I love them. I love having cards in games face to face. We played years and years of a card based system, but this is so funky and badly done. And when I went to look at the Master Book cards in the copy of Tank Girl that I bought, there are a bunch of abbreviations and weird numbers on them as well. It's not like each card explains itself. It has more things that you have to figure out. There's more, but generally the game feels like a collection of arbitrary rules.
Mhm.
It's especially weird when you get to the universal system for building quote unquote special effects, like magic. Here we have a 3-column landscaped worksheet that you have to work through to figure out the costs of any special effects. You'd expect then, okay, that's fine. There would now be a section of finished examples, like a lot of those. Oh no, there are not. These things are not there. They're just like, okay, here's your calculus that you need to do. It really makes champions look super easy.
Wow.
So, World of Tank Girl, the mechanical elements that it brings in, it's expanding the mechanics slightly, vehicle combat. I'll come back to that in a moment. Here's the thing. The RPG sourcebook, when you look at the first page, it has a printing date of February 1995. So that means that we've got that February 1995. The book is done. It's been to printer. It's already been edited. The film doesn't release until March 31st of 1995.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they saw this and were like, yeah, we're going to do this. This is the game that we want to do. It's not based on the comic, but it's based on the movie.
Hmm.
And they committed to it. They
Yeah.
committed to this whole thing. And that means as well, something I'll come back to, that they were working hard in this game, probably from an early draft of the film because the film got drastically changed over time. I don't know if they saw a final cut of the film. I have no idea, but I can't even imagine that kind of gamble. And the thing is that the World of Tank Girl book, while it does have some source book stuff to expand the world, again, it really is based on the movie, what the movie implies, that kind of thing. There are some mechanical tweaks. There are new skills. There's vehicle combat. There's some optional rules for making combat much nastier, like hit location. It was also, as I'm looking through the Tank Girl box set, discovered that I expected that with each of these worlds, there would be a set of unique master book cards for
Mm-hmm.
each world. This seems like an obvious choice. We've got some wild cards based on NPCs or thematics or things like that. Oh, nope, nope. Don't have that. That is not in there.
Sad.
So I have some other things to say, but Mark, what is your experience slash knowledge of Tank Girl?
I have the Tank Girl box set on my shelf here in front of me. I got it maybe a decade or so ago. I have not opened it. It's just an artifact to have. I saw the movie when it came out in theaters. What it is, I love it for a lot of reasons, but it is not for everyone for sure. I actually saw the movie before I read the comics, and I just thought, I'm glad there's an RPG. I opened it up and looked through it. I was like, yeah, I'm probably never going to play this, but I'm not going to get rid of it. It's nice to have.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There is an attempt in the text of the World of Tank Girl, which is technically what it's called, World of Tank Girl, as they called all of these master book things, to kind of have a cheeky and irreverent tone,
Hmm.
but at least today it feels very forced.
Yeah,
There's some meta intrusions by Tank Girl in there, but it's like they felt they just kind of had to have that in there.
very very like a Deadpool-y forced them.
Yeah, bad Deadpool.
Yeah, bad.
There are some things definitely in the book, particularly about characters. There's a whole subplot in the book about the founder of Big Business, the company that is the adversary to Tank Girl, the founder having found an alien spaceship and having touched an alien spaceship engine and getting messages from an alien world
Hmm.
that I don't think that's in the movie. Uh,
No, it definitely is not. No.
yeah. And so I have the feeling that is something from the cutting room floor. That was in the original script. And of course, they wrote and built it. It's like if you've ever read any of those Alan Dean Foster
Hmm.
novelizations of movies where clearly
Yep.
he was going from a script and not the final film. About Tank Girl as an apocalyptic thing,
Hmm.
it is not a nuclear apocalypse. So one of the things is, of course, by the 90s, we have the Berlin Wall fall. We've got to kind of twist away from nuclear. Instead, we have a comet, and a comet strikes the Earth and creates the devastation. And we get a fallen desert Australia, which I think is deliberate for a couple of reasons. It gives them the mutant kangaroos that are
Hmm.
running around, but it also, of course, apes the aesthetic of the Road Warrior.
Yeah.
So it's borrowing a lot from that. And there are a bunch of other movies that have this vibe to it that are happening in this time. Like there are a couple of Comet movies. There's Hardware. I'm thinking of another movie that has a real vibe and look of that same thing.
Hmm.
Screamers is another one, even though that's kind of set on an alien world, it definitely does that. And I think that's really interesting. Like we have this shift in terms of what the anxieties are and how we're going to approach them. Again, a certain amount of irony
Hmm.
that I think is interesting. But what I also think is critical is this game doesn't interrogate the apocalypse
Yeah.
at all. There, it has all the vehicle combat rules and stuff, all of the trappings, but there are no rules for survival, anything like that. Now, mind you, of course, it's a comedic film, but the game doesn't provide the tools for comedy in a light way. It's still a crunchy, granular, semi-realistic game, and it can't find its tone. I don't know if you've had experiences like that in other games where the tone doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, it feels like in games like that, it was either one person working under a lot of pressure with little context, or a team that has been brought in, and everyone just kind of throwing stuff together. And there's a mishmash of tone, both in writing and in like definitely in mechanics. We can see here, just like there's a lot of things put together and that
Yeah.
make a lot of sense.
It's such a strange license. Like, if they had, it's not even like Tank Girl the comic was a huge, huge hit.
Yeah, it was definitely an underground favorite, but yeah.
Yeah, that they thought this was their market just absolutely baffles me.
Yeah. I imagine I imagine the license is not expensive.
Okay,
So that was
reasonable.
probably a thing. The thing that baffles me is that it was a box set instead of a book. Like I have like, like the Ghost Dog RPG and like stuff like that. It's like people got a cheap license and put out a soft cover and forgot about it. But like to make this part of like a small-ish line and make a box set, which is much more expensive than just putting a book together. That's a strong choice.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that card form factor,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I take that back. If you're not doing individual cards that fit with the world,
Yeah.
you only need to do a master book box set. It
Yep.
has the cards, and then
You have
you
boosters
do
or yeah.
the simple booklets, but they didn't do that. If I remember correctly, at some point they did put out some of the world books separately,
Mm.
and that might have also been a problem is you had two different form factors. But I at this point I can't quite remember. It is a really interesting time capsule for two things. That meeting point of punk and grunge,
Mm-hmm.
where in the 1990s, and Chuck Klosterman has talked about that in his book about the 1990s, there is this weird move to kind of irony
Mm-hmm.
and ironic detachment from everything and inability to take things seriously. Everything kind of has to have a jokey tone, even if it is serious. And that I think we're so kind of away from that particular form of it that maybe we can't see it. And there are other games that are of the time, and I can't remember the exact year, but and I may have mentioned this game before, but White Wolf's Human Occupied Landfill is another game that I think does kind of dark, apocalyptic, but it really leans into it. As
Yeah.
trashy as that game is, it it is consistent in its vibe. I think this
It
one
certainly is.
is radically inconsistent. But, if you like Tank Girl, it's got lovely pictures from the movie. It's got some illustrations taken from the comic. It's got some original artwork. I think it's not a bad thing to pick up if you're a Tank Girl fan,
Yeah.
or if you're interested in seeing another vision of the apocalypse from the 90s.
Yeah. Or just having an artifact of that era of design,
Yeah,
for better or for worse.
yeah. So let's talk about our other game here.
Yeah. So the other game is Ralph Bakshi's Wizards RPG. This is a very, very post-apocalyptic setting. It's from 1992. This was Wit Publications. I think the designer was, I did not put him in my notes, but I have him right here.
Bohm,
Boom. Yes, there we are. Um,
Bolme.
oh, yeah. They did, I think they did, Mutazoids first. And they also, I believe, right after Wizards did a WWF game.
Oh yeah, I didn't know about that till I was looking this stuff up. There was a
Yeah.
WWF adventure game. What the
Yeah.
what?
Amazing. They Yeah, so it's an adaptation, the official adaptation of the 1977 Ralph Bakshi film. The film is wild. I just rewatched it again last night, but I've seen it many, many times. It is a post-nuclear apocalypse, but it is a pure fantasy movie. It is millions of years after a nuclear war was kicked off by some terrorists setting off a bomb in the UN and destroy the earth. Some mutants survived. Humans eventually were wiped out. And the, what do they call, the true ancestors of man, elves and fairies and dwarves and gnomes, returned as the earth's primary inhabitants. The movie is amazing. It is animated in a style. If you've seen any Ralph Bakshi stuff, you know exactly what the style is. He also did the older Lord of the Rings movies.
Hmm.
He did Fritz the Cat, Cool World later on, and some things. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of rotoscoping. There's a lot of kind of like animation on top of stock footage, like crudely colored in. And it is definitely of the time pacing wise. The music is kind of like slow and psychedelic. It is the story is very simple, but it is mostly vibes. It is pretty good. It holds up really well, I think. In this fantasy world, the apocalypse has changed the laws of physics. Technology doesn't really work anymore for the most part because magic has taken over. At the top of the story, there's the birth of these two wizards, Avatar and Black Wolf. Avatar is the pretty good one. Black Wolf is the ugly bad one. And basically, Black Wolf went off and tried to bring technology back. Avatar stayed and made things nice with the elves and fairies. And the big point comes when Black Wolf uncovers Nazi propaganda and is able to embolden his armies and scatter the elves until evil is eventually defeated. It is not a subtle film in any way. Lots of swastikas, lots of cartoonish, gory, but like really like I don't want to say gritty because that has a weird connotation now, but like the visceral, I think the
Yeah.
violence is in it, both like visually and tonally. There are mass executions. There are things that very strongly mirror the actual things that happened and are still happening in some places. But yeah, not subtle at all. So that is an interesting setting to put a fantasy world in. And in that world, your players are it's nice because it gives you a strong direction. It's not just your fantasy adventurers doing fantasy adventurer stuff, and specifically, you're not going on adventures looking for glory and treasure. You are basically resistance fighters. You are doing guerrilla raids. You are escorting people. You are hiding a lot of the time. You're disrupting supply lines, except your elves and fairies. There's a lot of espionage and all that sort of stuff. So that's an interesting focus for the gameplay. And the tone again, not subtle, but both the movie and the book, I think, have this really interesting mix of like very earnest idealism. There's narration that is very earnest, I think is the word. Yeah. It's
Hmm.
very meaningful. Like it's describing how nature is encourages beauty and growth, and technology it always works to destroy.
It is wild. This is
Yeah.
for me. I think about Wizards. I'll say this: like I saw this in the theater when I was eight
Yeah.
years old
Yep.
multiple times, and
Mm,
it dramatically shaped my perception of the world.
yeah.
But it is a thing that this is Tolkien, but the subtext is text. It's that Gareth Marenghi. You
Yeah.
know, people who use
Coward.
subtext are cowards.
Yeah,
It is,
it is the World War II animation, fantasy
yeah,
animation to the Lord of the Rings World War One. It's yeah,
100%.
but it does have that same tone. It was, you know, the RPG was 1992, but the movie was 77, and they both still have that really dark, sardonic tone to them. Iconic scenes from the movie that are darkly humorous, but that all that comes through in the book as well. In the intro, there's kind of like a proto Olivia Hill rule. You know, there's a lot of Nazis in the game, but they're like explicitly, you know, we do not support or condone Nazism in any way, shape, or form. And then it continues. We also do not advocate illegal activities, witchcraft, drug use, robot assassins, racism, torture, murder, escapism, appeasement, genocide, demon summoning, or the detonation of tactical nuclear devices without adult supervision. And so that sort of dark, bleak, sarcastic humor is a constant throughout, baked into that earnest worldview of nature good, technology bad. So the core book came out in 1992. There were two other source books that came out afterwards. There's the Montagar source book, which is the Goodlands, and the Scorch, with a T, Scorch source book, where is Black Wolf. It's the bad wastelands. And then there's also another adventure, Desert Wind, and a GM screen, a few little things. But that's pretty much it. They not a lot of support past those initial things. The system itself, probably not as bad as Tank Girl. It is definitely a product of its time. Character generation is, I mean, it is straightforward but similar. You know, pick your race. You spend 40 points on attributes based off of the racial averages of your 8 stats: strength, intelligence, dexterity, charisma, constitution, perception, size, and willpower. So you distribute points between those to move them up and down from your base. And then you do calculations, a lot of calculations for your secondary attributes: your might, which is different than strength, your damage bonus, your spirit, which is different than willpower, movement rates, reaction speeds, recovery. You have shock points and hit points, which are interesting. And everyone starts off with luck points, which is a neat kind of nod towards future, more narrative-y stuff. You can just spend your luck points to automatically win a thing or not get killed or come across something interesting. So that's neat. There is, on top of the attributes, there is a skill system. It is West End ish in that it does have a paranoia. I think paranoia is the closest system I can think of to it.
Mhm.
Percentile based, there are each set of skills is tied to an attribute. You have a base score for each of those, and then you, as you get skills, those add pluses to that. And they have basically background or career packages that you can pick and mix and match to give those sets.
Now, I want to walk through. You have your attributes
Mm-hmm.
and you buy your attributes. And
Yeah.
by the way, 8 different attributes, but they all cost different if you want
Yep.
to buy
They
them
all
up.
cost different points.
Okay.
Like strength is 6 points, wisdom is 8 points each. Yeah.
But then you take that, and for each of the skills,
Mm-hmm.
you look at the attribute, and that gives you a number, which
Yeah.
is usually something like two, three, four, five, or six.
Yeah. But this is a formula. There's a table you look up. It's like 1 to, I think it's 1 to 4 is 1, 5 to 8 is 2, and so on. So it's basically like mod or divided by 5 round up.
Yeah. And when we look at the example character,
Mm-hmm.
most of their skills that they have on their sheet are 3, 4, or 5. There's one that's an 8.
Yeah.
Now, there are some modifiers for difficulty,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not rolling that d20 against the attribute. You are rolling it against that skill. You're
Yep.
rolling a d20
Yep.
against, most of the time, a 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
It is bleak.
it is the wildest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen a game go, hey, guess what? you're going to miss 75% of the time.
Yeah, and there are a lot of, you said there's a lot of modifiers for difficulties and advantages and disadvantages and stuff. And I don't know how much of this is intentional and how much is a happy accident, but it feels like, I mean, you are definitely underdogs in the face of this technological army that's coming at you. And it does definitely get that sort of hopeless feeling, but it does encourage you to, instead of just running out and attacking a tank with a sword, it does encourage you to use more guerrilla tactics and set things up and give yourself every advantage so that when it comes to making your roll, you have a better than 1 in 4 chance. So that's kind of neat. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. I don't know if anyone actually ever played this. It does have a lot of like little crunchy things. It has difficulty bands. It has opposed rolls. You can get crits and blunders, and there are tables for melee and ranged weapons and everything for that. There's falling and drowning rules. There's not like hit locations. It's not that crunchy, but it is on the crunchy side. It's about it's about where it should be, I think, for the time. One of the other things that is a little crunch, but also unique is the magic system. No one is playing a wizard, but people can do magic. And like the other things, it is difficult to succeed at, but there's not really a set spell list. You can either build a spell, invent a spell, and you build it from determine the area, the damage, the duration, what the components might be. There's a dozen things, range and whatnot, and assign points to those to create the spell that increases the difficulty or the cost to cast it and whatnot. So you can have a bandolier of common spells, and they do have some written out. But the other half of that is what is called evocation. And that's basically just like make a magic roll and something might happen, which is cool because you're probably not going to make that roll and bad things are probably going to happen. So there's that. So in the book, there is a solitaire adventure, which is, I think there's, again, like in Paranoia, there's one that you can walk through yourself. There's a sample adventure called Tunnel of Hate. There's advice for making adventures that are all very, again, of the time. They're very kind of like beat plot driven, semi scripted. Go point A, point B, point C. They have a list of basic plots like assassination, diplomacy, recon, escorting, sabotage, and then they have like kind of like the twist cards. They have a list of like, here are some plot devices you can use, like betrayal or a time limit all of a sudden, or you discover something new to drop in there. And it's standard for the time, I think. But it does have a GM section that has not principles necessarily, but GM advice that has very principle read, like be prepared, keep on top of things, show and tell, be dynamic, go with the feel, be flexible, be tough, be fair. You will be wrong, and of course, go see the movie for the vibes. I don't think it is necessarily good GM advice, but it is definitely in the direction of GMs have rules too.
Mm-hmm.
And the book, of course, has a bestiary of creatures and mutants. It has extensive skill systems and equipment and whatnot. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It comes from it is an early 90s RPG. I kind of did a lot of comparison to see like what it reminds me of the most. It is a bespoke system. It's not building off of one.
I will say, I think GURPS has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. But I do think Paranoia does have a lot of like there's a lot of DNA in there,
Mm-hmm.
both like mechanically and tonally, which is interesting because it's not the same at all fictionally. And it does feel like not strictly a transitional game, but it is like in that era where things are starting to become like more, hey, let's make it more like a movie than like a war game.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some design nods to that. There's a heavy emphasis on lore, very, very deep, and again, not subtle. There are, the sort of like it has advantages and disadvantages, which have their problems
Yes.
across the board. It does encourage you to use those as role play hooks. which is nice. It does have the luck points, which let you, the meta currency that lets you do that. Importantly, I think the action in the game is set during the movie. It's after Black Wolf starts its his initial attacks and genocide of the elves, but before he discovers they call it the Dream Machine, which is a film projection that shows the Nazi propaganda films. So it's in an interesting place, and you could not necessarily play the movie, but there's a lot of possibility in that short slice of the film story that is intriguing to me. Tone wise, the the movie is way more psychedelic than the game could ever be. Just
Yeah.
as a visual and oral artifact. Definitely, if I were to play or run this game, I would require everyone to watch it because there's just no way to mimic that tone without
Hmm.
that. It's extremely anti-war. It's extremely anti-fascist. It's very I don't know if it's necessarily anti-technology, but it is anti-technocratic, like very, very fantasy hippie 70s stuff.
Hmm.
There's the society as it is has been there for literally millions of years, and progress is seen as a bad thing. Again, yeah, the tone is very earnest with these like almost jarring shifts to irony in like little cutout scenes with the soldiers and whatnot. Both in the book and in the movie, I think the apocalypse itself, it is way in the past, but it is described in detail, like very, it is not abstract. It is kind of like factual and also kind of casual, just like here's what technology did. And this is, pre Berlin Wall falling. So there are still nuclear tensions in the air. And this is just this is what might happen. A few other details. Again, skills are difficult to use, but especially combat is rough. Partly because of that, but partly because like your elves, fairies, dwarves, gnomes with swords and bows and whatnot, and your enemies have machine guns, and those rules for machine guns, like they remind me of old cyberpunk rules, like you like you can do bursts or full auto, and roll for every group of like 50 bullets and see how many of them hit your guys and do damage. And it is, yeah, I mean, it doesn't say, hey, don't fight someone who has a machine gun, but it mechanically says, do not fight someone with a machine gun. Like, find a way to get around that. Also, interestingly, characters can't be human. Humans aren't around anymore. This is a purely fantasy race apocalypse. Yeah, I think it just assumes that you're gonna fail a lot and fight from an underdog position, which again is not explicitly spelled out in the text, but definitely is like if you know how to read mechanics, tells you that strongly.
It is interesting that our apocalypse here, it's again a dying Earth, far future,
Yeah,
which often doesn't spell out the apocalypse. But here, the apocalypse is fascism and the apocalypse is technology. Like
yeah.
those two
There's almost
things.
there's almost two apocalypses. There's the nuclear holocaust that happened millions of years ago, and then there is the impending technological holocaust that is coming.
15 years, one film, an RPG based on one film
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago. And one of the things it really does show is the impact of cable television
Yes.
and video rentals.
Mm-hmm.
Like that kept Wizards alive in a way that you would not have expected it to survive.
Yeah, I definitely saw Wizards more times than necessary on HBO in the 80s.
I bet it was super cheap for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also worth noting the gender politics of the original movie are really
Yeah.
questionable and problematic.
Yeah, that's across the board with Bakshi stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's a lot of political subtext, gender subtext that are questionable there.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the game itself, it comes out from Ken Whitman, Wit
Mhm.
Publications, who ends up doing just a few things. You mentioned WWF and Mutazoids, but also gets tied up with Traveler
Yeah, a
after
little bit.
this, and
Yeah.
there's some issues with that. The author Edward Bohm
Hmm.
to connect up to Tank Girl, he worked on, for West End Games, The World of Necroscope, the
Yeah.
licensed RPG.
Yeah.
He also, once they went over to the D6 system, worked on Men in Black. And he did a ton of Paranoia, a ton
Mhm.
of Cyberpunk, as you alluded to, Cyber Generation, also L5R and Castle Falkenstein.
Oh yeah.
But then it looks like he drops off by the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
But an interesting like tie over of these things.
Hmm.
Would you play this?
Ah, I would run it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to definitely have a lot of trust in the person who was running it to play, and definitely like have as like Cat's tone setting, like we are underdogs.
Hmm.
This is not heroic fantasy. We are guerrilla freedom fighters, and we're probably not going to do great. And just kind of like feel have that sort of Night Witches, Band of Blades kind of tone to it.
Other thing is there is a ton of world building in here.
So
Like
much.
as you talked about, there's a long descriptor at the beginning. There's lots of sections on the different peoples, and then we've got two different source books.
Yeah.
And Bohm is involved with one of them, but not the other.
Hmm.
Did they just make this up whole cloth? Because this a lot of this stuff is not, I mean,
Yeah.
most of this stuff is not present in the movie. This
Yeah.
is this is
But it's
completely
interesting because this so Bakshi originally pitched this. He wrote it in like 2 days based on doodles from his high school notebooks. Basically, he was like, "This is the War of the Wizards." Had these cool drawings and
I
basically
was
like
gonna
this is
paint it on the side of a van, but then I decided to do a movie.
it is 100% a van painting game. So I don't know this is actually true, but I imagine that he has a lot of lore that didn't make it into the movie that was possibly referenced
I
in the
would
game.
love to know just how
Yeah.
much, because
Yeah.
it is wild. And there is a little bit of there's a blurb from him at the back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The important part, the blurb in the back teases Wizards 2, which never happened. It's like, it's coming out next year, everybody. It never came out. It never happened. It's a myth.
Instead, as you say, we got Cool World.
Yep. Which, yeah.
These are
And
wild. Like the 1990s. Again, both Master Book and this are attempts to like build new systems that I think echo and ape other games, but
mhm,
maybe don't ask the why.
yeah.
Like, what are those games doing? Why do you need to bring them? Because it feels very weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that they all are their own things and so similar to adjacent things without like explicitly being. And I know there's like a lot of fragmentation and movement around in the industry, but from a modern perspective, it feels like it would have been worthwhile to like take a season and say, we have these projects coming up. Maybe we should try to make at least a base system that we can customize off of. I personally love bespoke games, so I'm glad that
Hmm.
didn't happen. But from a
Right.
business perspective, it feels like that would have been a stronger move. But I'm not in the business, so
Huh.
that's fine.
Anything else you want to say about Tank Girl or Wizards?
For all their flaws, and there are many. I own Tank Girl. I own all the Wizards books. I'm never getting rid of them. I may wind up playing at least Wizards at some point. But yeah, they're just like really neat artifacts of the time based on properties that have like a small but passionate following. Yeah.
I have to wonder if an apocalypse world hack for Wizards might
Ooh,
some thoughts there.
interesting.
Give everybody the ability to reach into the psychic maelstrom in their own way. Thank you for listening to the show. This has been Roll for Mutation. This is a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. You can find out more about that at openhearthgaming.com. We have a Patreon that supports all of these podcasts. We have a Discord that you can join. You can give us feedback. We'd love to hear that. As always with podcasts, if you give us a little rate, review, reshare, if you're watching this on YouTube, thumbs upping and subscribing, all of those things help us out a lot. Thank you, Mark, for going on this weird journey today.
Yeah, thanks for taking me along.
And listeners, that is our show.